This is Nathan Fantasy Football League Updates. Today on Nathan Fantasy Football League Updates, we reveal my predictions for Week 1 of the NFL season. We'll get you my top players of the week and reveal who I think will be victorious at the end of Week 1. All that and more next. Nathan, Fantasy Football League Updates. The NFL season is upon us, and that means the Fantasy Football League season is just about underway. So it is time to get you my official predictions for Week 1. And it's a crucial week. Your team's either going to get started on a great note or on a sour note. And it's really about, moving forward. Obviously, Week 1, your team can have a bad out-of-the-gates week and still be the best team in the league later on. But it's important to get out to a good start. And so with these prediction videos, we're going to get you my spread for each of the 5 games in the week. And we're going to get you their turning point players. So the players that are going to really matter to help them win. And we're going to get you the game of the week and the highest scoring fantasy player of the week. So let's waste no more time and get you into the first matchup this week. And it's the Grand Rapids Groundhogs taking on the Big Brain Bandicoots. The Brisbane Bay Bandicoots. Still getting used to that here. But Bandicoots Groundhogs really love this matchup. It's going to be a great Week 1 matchup, and I think there's a lot of potential. This will be a fun game to watch, but we'll start with the Groundhogs. Obviously, they roll out at the quarterback tandem, Jaden Daniels and Tua Tagovailoa. Both have some interesting matchups. Tua plays the Jaguars, and Jaden Daniels plays the Buccaneers. I think both of them have great potential to have good weeks. How does the rookie quarterback fare? I think both of them have productive weeks. I think Tua has the better week of the two quarterbacks, but I think Jaden Daniels is going to show up Week 1 against Tampa Bay. So I like the start at the quarterback position. Moving down the board to the running backs, well, Achane and Cook, I feel like Dolphins are going to look to more exploit the pass game against that heavy rush defense that the Jaguars have. So I think Achane, especially splitting carries with Mostert, has a down performance. So not a great Week 1 showing from him. But I think Cook, on the other hand, he's got the Cardinals. They have very bad pass rush. Love Cook to go off in Week 1. So already some solid point getters. Then we get to your wide receiving core. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Pittman. I think both of them play very middle of the row. Both will be consistent scorers, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is your turning point player for the Groundhogs. I think he's going to really dictate how this week goes for the Groundhogs. Still, though, Marvin Harrison Jr., I like him to have a solid first week against the Buffalo Bills, who we've got to see how that secondary looks this season with a lot of guys now out of the organization. Tight end, Travis Kelce, I think he doesn't have like a 20-plus point performance week. I think, obviously, the Ravens are going to kind of key in on him and force Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, if he even plays, and Hollywood Brown, who I don't think is playing Week 1, to make more plays. They're going to try to take Kelce away from Mahomes. So I think Kelce, against a tough Ravens defense, has a middle-of-the-road type of game, no 20-plus point game, but I think he still finds a way to get some catches and some productive fantasy use. Cooper Kupp, same type of deal. I think Puka Nacua has the better game of the two, but Cooper Kupp's still going to get 6, 7, 8 targets a game, and if he's able to reel in a bunch of those and even a touchdown, solid week for Cooper Kupp. Looking at the special teams, Colts defense against the Texans, don't love the matchup. I think they're going to have a down week. Santos, it'll be okay. I don't know how much the Bears are going to be kicking this week. I think they're going to try to get in the end zone more, so I think that'll kill Santos. But Raiders, I think they're going to punt a little bit more than they expect against the Chargers. So overall, I think it's a solid week for the Groundhogs, a productive week. But on the other side, the Bandicoots, quarterback-wise, Jordan Love, he's playing Philadelphia, so I don't love the quarterback-to-defense matchup. But I still think the Brisbane Bay Bandicoots we'll get a productive outing from Jordan Love. No 20-plus points, but I think it'll be just that 13, 14, 15 range. On the other side, Kyler Murray, I expect him to be scrambling a lot against the Bills. I think he'll find some productive touchdowns. I think the Cardinals will give the Bills a scare. Give me Murray on a 20-plus point week. I think Murray has a great week, but this is a solid quarterback tandem for the Bandicoots. Looking at the running back room, Bijan against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Don't necessarily love it. I think the Steelers defense is going to give them some trouble, but I still think they give him the rock enough. I think a touchdown for Bijan saves the week for him. So not too bad. Kyron, on the other hand, I think, the Rams will find they're going to want to throw the football a little bit more against the Lions. If Kyron can be involved there, Kyron Williams, it could be a solid outing for Kyron Williams and Bijan Robinson, but I think they'll both be just solid enough. On the other side of things, your wide receivers, Devontae Adams, again, playing the Chargers, who have a terrible secondary, 20-plus point week for Devontae Adams. If it weren't for another player later on, this would be the highest scoring player of the week. I expect Devontae Adams to have a great week one against a poor Chargers defense. And then your turning point player, Malik Neighbors, I think, luckily he plays the Minnesota Vikings, who don't have a secondary either. So I think he has a really good week one for a rookie. I think Daniel Jones will have to throw him the football. Do I trust Daniel Jones? Absolutely not. But do I think they will get him the football? I think so. I think Malik Neighbors has a productive week, but that is your turning point player, because I can see Malik Neighbors really, really sucking because of how bad his quarterback is and because of just how bad the Giants are. Looking on the board, Ingram has a all right day. I think other receivers in Jacksonville will outshine him. So I think he plays at that, just hovering around that 10-point range. Mixon has a good game. I think he'll find the end zone. He's going to be the bell cow for the Texans. I don't see really him going any shy of that 14-15 range. And then Browns defense, they do play the Cowboys, but I still trust the Browns defense to get you 5+. McPherson, I think he'll get some more of just the extra points against the Patriots this week. A lot of touchdowns for the Bengals is what I predict. And then Michael Dixon, I don't know if he's going to punt a ton. They play the Broncos. So the staple player for the Bandicoots might not be doing his thing. But that brings us to our first prediction. And give me the Bandicoots in an 8-point spread. That's right. I've got the Bandicoots winning week one in an 8-point spread over the Groundhogs. I just think this week plays better for them with Devontae Adams and even Malik Neighbors getting good matchups. I think the running backs will do just enough. The quarterbacks, same type of deal. I think they're going to do just enough and exceed where the Groundhogs matchups are a little bit more up in the air, a little bit more questionable. I don't love the Achane pick, and I think Kelsey's going to struggle in week one. Cooper Kupp could be the same way. It's all up for interpretation. But first prediction, give me the Bandicoots over the Groundhogs in an 8-point spread. Second matchup of the week sees the Empire Strike Back take on the Iguanas. And I think this one, again, another fun matchup, but let's dive right into this one. See who has more of the player fantasy advantage. And we'll start with the Empire. I think, Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield will lead the helm. Jared Goff, of course, going up against the Rams defense, who looks a lot different without Aaron Donald. I still feel like, Jared Goff, very middle of the row, consistent guy. I think he finds a way to get you that 14, 15, 16 range. So a solid performance from Goff. But on the other side, Baker Mayfield will be more of the question quarterback. I think Baker Mayfield, week one, he gets the Washington Commanders. I think he tears up that secondary with help from Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I think really he pulls out a almost 20-point performance in week one. So the quarterback tandem off to a good start. I think very consistent start for the Empire. On the other side, Saquon Barkley running the football. Green Bay Packers, I think, are going to really key in on stopping the run. Because of that, Saquon Barkley, I think, has a down week. Obviously, that'll start throwing some red flags for the Empire. I just project a rough first week, because obviously the Packers defense going to key in to stop Saquon. So I think a poor week one for Saquon is what to expect. On the other side of things, Etienne Jr., I think he's got to get involved in the receiving side of things. I think the Jaguars might trail early against the Dolphins. So if he's able to figure out the receiving side of things, he'll have a good week. But if not, it could be a problem moving forward, at least for week one. But I think Etienne, nonetheless, kind of scrapes by. So the running back room, kind of concerning, but the quarterback room keeps you afloat. Now we go to the wide receivers, and I think this is where the fun starts. And we will start with the top scorer of the week. I predict the top scorer of the week to be Justin Jefferson. That's right. Jay Jettis will lead the league this week in week 1. That's right. Sam Darnold is at the helm, but they play the New York Giants, and we all know the Vikings love to scheme in Justin Jefferson into the mix. I think he gets plenty of targets. I think he could even find the end zone 2 times against the Giants. I think the Giants might be one of the worst teams in football, and I think Justin Jefferson lights them up with almost a 30-point fantasy week. So Justin Jefferson is my week 1 player of the week, and alongside him, you add Puka Nacua, who I think against the Lions secondary, which is new, we're going to try to figure things out. But I think Puka Nacua takes advantage of that. Matt Stafford gets him the football along with Cooper Kupp. So I think one of them has a good week. But I think Puka Nacua, week 1, continues where he left off. I think he finds almost a 20-point performance. I think another solid week for Puka. Dalton Kincaid against Arizona. I like the matchup. I don't know who can really guard Dalton Kincaid in Arizona. So I think he has a solid week 1 for a tight end. And then we get to your turning point player. It is Tank Dell. Tank Dell, once again, we've talked about Texans, Bears, wide receivers, who's going to step up on a week-to-week basis. They play the Colts. I just don't see Tank Dell being the guy week 1. I think they're going to say, hey, look at this shiny new toy we have in Stephon Diggs. Let's get him the football. I think Tank Dell fantasy value really hurts from that in week 1. So I think he has a poor week, but still, that's your turning point player. If he has a great week, I think that could be the difference here. Moving down the line, Jets play the 49ers, so rough defensive start for you there. Don't really like the Jets defense. Zorloin, I think we'll get a couple field goal attempts against the 49ers, bend but don't break defense, so a good choice there. And Tressway, obviously if things don't work out for the Commanders in week 1, he will be punting a lot. So solid pickup there. But overall, I think your wide receivers and quarterbacks really help push this week forward, and that'll be the stars this week for the Empire. On the other side, the Iguanas, they roll out Jalen Hurts. I think obviously he'll have a 20-plus point performance in the quarterback room. I think, he's playing the Packers. He'll find a way to get it to his receivers, find a way to steal touchdowns from Saquon Barkley, scamper in the end zone. Jalen Hurts, consistent 20-plus point guy. I like him this week for the Iguanas. Alongside that, though, Deshaun Watson gets a tough Cowboys defense. He has not looked like the Texans version of Deshaun Watson that was traded to Cleveland. Because of that, I think he's going to barely scrape by that 10 range. He's going to struggle to find the end zone. I think it's another rough start for Deshaun Watson. On the other side, your running back room, I think Montgomery, if he gets in the end zone, is productive. If not, it's going to be a rough show from David Montgomery. And James Connors, I think he'll get involved in the pass game. Might find the end zone. He's the bell cow there. He's going to get all the running back touches. So I like James Connors, not so much David Montgomery if he's unable to find the end zone. Receiving wise, you're going to start CeeDee Lamb this week. Obviously, he's missed a lot of practices, but they say he is going to be ready to go for week 1 against Cleveland. I think Cleveland, obviously, some great DBs in that room, will kind of lock CeeDee Lamb down to the point where he won't get 20. I still think he can produce a 15, 16-point week, though. So CeeDee Lamb's still productive, just not that number 2 overall value that you took him at. Looking forward, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think he has a great week against LA. I think he flirts with the 20-plus point range. Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, still a deadly duo. Just one plays a little bit harder of a defense. The other one plays the Rams. So I think Amon-Ra, again, will be a consistent guy. That's going to get you near 20. So the wide receiving core will keep you afloat again. So both receiving cores really helping out here. The difference is your turning point player in Brock Bowers, tight end for the Raiders. They hit the road to take on the LA Chargers. How do I feel about that? Don't quite know. I think if they get Brock Bowers involved early, if he can take advantage of the poor passing defense the Chargers have, I think Brock Bowers could be in for a great week. Could be a great tight end pick in week 1. But only time will tell. So he's your turning point player. I think he'll be fine. I think it'll be very similar to like the day Evan Ingram has for the Bandicoots. But we'll only find out. And obviously, your flex now change up there. It's not Ayuk, because he just signed a deal, hasn't been really practicing. We don't know how that's going to look against the Jets. You go with T. Higgins against the New England Patriots. And honestly, I understand it. Ayuk obviously has not been in practice. He's been holding out. They finally reach a deal. We don't think he's going to be involved in as much in week one. So because of that, you ship the T. Higgins, who will probably have a good week one against the Patriots. That's all I need to say. He'll probably find the end zone. So T. Higgins at the flex is a good spot. 49ers defense, we kind of talked about this. You're battling the defenses that are battling on Monday night. The Empire having the Jets and the Iguanas having the 49ers. I think the 49ers do a little bit better than the Jets in a good game on Monday. Looking ahead, Jake Moody will get some kicks up. I think Johnston will punt a little bit for Pittsburgh. But overall, I think still looking at this, I'm going to have to go with the top score of the week. The Empire get it done in a 7-point spread over the Iguanas in game number 2 of week 1. Our third matchup of week 1 sees the Bay City Bunnies square off against the Zestmeisters in what should be an incredible battle between the two. One gets to start out the season projected in the bottom of the rankings with a 1-0 record. The other will sit at 0-1 and have to look to claw their way back in week 2. So let's start with the Bunnies. For the Bunnies, they roll out a solid quarterback duo for week 1. C.J. Stroud and Matt Stafford. C.J. Stroud, I think, goes 20+. He plays the Indianapolis Colts. He's got great new receiving weapons. I think he takes advantage, finds the end zone a couple times, like C.J. Stroud. And Matt Stafford, I'm fine on. I think he'll have a very middle-of-the-row week. I think he'll find the end zone a couple times. He'll get it to his plethora of receivers. And I really think both quarterbacks will have a solid week 1 for the Bunnies. On the flip side of things, we look at your running backs. And the running back room, I think, might not be the same as the quarterback room. And that brings us to your turning point player. It's Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry will debut as a Raven on Thursday Night Football against the Kansas City Chiefs. And we don't know what to expect. Is Lamar still going to run a ton? Is Derrick Henry really going to return to how he looked in Tennessee? We will have to find out. But I think my prediction for how it goes, Derrick Henry will get a fair share of carries, but I just think it's the Chiefs' defense that is too solid and can hold him and Lamar. They would rather them throw the football, obviously, but still. I think the Chiefs defense will key in on stopping Henry. If he's able to find the end zone on a 1-yard run, great. But I don't think he's going to find a ton of yards in play. And because of that, I think Derrick Henry has a down week 1, but he's your turning point player. I could see a world where Derrick Henry runs in for 2 scores and 100 yards against the Chiefs, but I think they're really going to be keyed on stopping the run this week. And I think Derrick Henry has a poor showing as his first game as a Raven. On the other side, you have Aaron Jones, who squares off against the New York Giants. I think he's going to be plenty involved in the pass game, and he'll run well. I think he has a very mediocre game against the Giants. I think they'd rather get in the hands, obviously, of Justin Jefferson to make sure he's happy and going. But still, Aaron Jones will be consistent this week. But the running back room, not as great as the quarterback room. But we move on to the wide receivers, and I don't project a great week for your wide receivers either. A.J. Brown against the Packers. I think, Jair Alexander is going to be following him around all week on Friday. Will he be able to get open? We're going to have to find out. I think he has a middle-of-the-row week, doesn't live up to that first-round pick hype in week 1. And on the other side, Zay Flowers, I think the Ravens are going to want to run their football. I think, they're going to try to get it to Zay Flowers. I think the Chiefs' corners, though, are going to blanket him pretty well. I don't even know if he's going to find the end zone. I think the wide receiving core struggles a little bit, too, for the Bunnies. However, we move to the tight end, Sam Laporta. I think he finds the end zone once for Detroit. I think he continues to dominate, pick up where he left off in his rookie campaign. So I love the tight end position this week for Sam Laporta. Flex is Calvin Ridley, who I think could be considered for another turning point player, but his Titans debut against the Chicago Bears, we're going to find out how it goes. Moving down the board, Seahawks defense plays the Broncos. That'll be a great week for the defense. Fairbairn for the Texans. He'll get a couple extra points and some field goals, so good matchup between the Colts and Texans. And then we look at the punter. It's Michael Dixon, it is just Dixon for the Broncos. He's going to be punting a lot, so good picks there for the Bunnies in the special teams unit. For the Zestmeisters, obviously, they roll out a quarterback tandem of Kirk Cousins and Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson, obviously, not a 20-plus point week. He's playing a really solid team in the Chiefs. I think, obviously, he'll run for a good amount of yards and find the end zone through the air or on the ground. So good week, obviously, every week pretty much for Lamar. Kirk Cousins against the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think finds a way to find the end zone a couple times through the air. I think Kirk Cousins is back for Atlanta, and I think he has a solid game as well. So both quarterback units looking pretty solid. For the Zestmeisters, though, where they differentiate, it's CMC in the running back room. He'll find the end zone. You know the 49ers are going to scheme him into the pass and run game. CMC will be an excellent choice this week for the Zestmeisters. On the other side, Kenneth Walker. I think, new offensive coordinator and new coach in Seattle, they're going to want to dominate the air against the Broncos. So I think Kenneth Walker kind of takes a back burner type of spot today, or at least in this game against the Broncos, surprisingly, but he'll still play serviceable enough. But I think they're just going to want to throw the ball just a little bit more to get him involved. Looking at the receiving room, Chris Olave squares off against the Carolina Panthers. I think that's domination for Olave in week 1 waiting to happen. And then your turning point player, it's Nico Collins. And I think Nico Collins has a lot to prove. He's got Stephon Diggs in the room. Who's the wide receiver run between them? We're going to find out here in week 1. That's why he's your turning point player, because I could see him still picking up where he left off and still being the number 1 wide receiver for CJ Stroud. On the other side of things, I could see him taking the second spot chair to Stephon Diggs. But it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic between if CJ Stroud is able to connect with Nico Collins in the end zone, because that's points both ways, but it leans a little bit towards the Zestmeisters. Tight end, George Kittle. I feel like Kittle always gets off to slow starts in the fantasy season. I think it's going to be another slow start, especially against the Jets. They're going to want to get Debo involved and maybe even Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey early. Because of that, I think Kittle has a down week 1. Then George Pickens, I think, he's the guy now in Pittsburgh. He'll have a dominant week 1. I think he's really going to get in the end zone maybe once, maybe twice, but Russell Wilson's going to be looking his way as long as it's Russell Wilson from the Seahawks and not Russell Wilson from the Broncos. Ravens play the Chiefs now at your defensive position. I think the Chiefs are going to find the end zone regardless, so this matchup, we'll see. We look at kicker Younghoe Koo. He'll get up some field goals too against a tough bend but don't break Pittsburgh Steelers defense, so I think that'll be good. And then you roll out Cook, who I think will punt a lot this week for Jacksonville, because I think the Dolphins and Jaguars are going to go back and forth early. But that will bring us now to my prediction for the third matchup this week. And in a 1-point spread, I'm going to take the Bunnies. I'm taking the Bunnies on the sheer factor that I think they have better matchups, better upside potential, where I have a little bit too many question marks and tough matchups with the Zestmeisters. So because of that, in a 1-point spread, I'm going with the Bunnies to defeat the Zestmeisters in week 1. We're bringing you into the number 4 matchup this week in week 1 in the Fantasy Football League. And now we bring you the number 10 team against the number 6 team. It's the Guantanamo Bay Flying Squirrels taking on the Rocky River Rough Riders. And who do I think gets off to a better start? Well, it's going to be a fun matchup this week. Some things are moving around for both teams, but we'll start with the Rocky River Rough Riders. For them, they start an incredible tandem this week in the quarterback room. Anthony Richardson finally returns from injury after concussions and other injuries. Can he stay healthy is going to be the main question, or is he just getting beat up again in week 1 by the Houston Texans? Only time will tell, but I think he has a solid week 1. We see the rushing ability. I think he's able to use his receivers a little bit more. Anthony Richardson has a good week, and then he pairs that up with Josh Allen, who every week Josh Allen is like a guaranteed 20-plus points. He plays the Arizona Cardinals week 1. I think Josh Allen on the ground finds the end zone a couple times, and maybe even through the air a couple times. 24-plus point week for Josh Allen in week 1. So the quarterback tandem already providing nearly 40 points for this Rough Riders team, in my opinion. And then you look at the running back room, that's where things get dicey. You're rolling out Rashid White, who week 1, I think against the Commanders, will definitely be able to stay afloat and stay consistent like he had been last season. I think he'll be great out of the backfield receiving, and I think he'll get some good rushing yards against a struggling Commanders team. But I could see Rashid White struggling as well. But the other running back is where we get to your turning point player. It's Javonte Williams from the Denver Broncos. Obviously, he missed a lot of last season with injuries, so now the question is he still the guy in Denver running the football? Well, we're going to find out. He's your turning point player. You're playing the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks roll Denver, as many people expect. Because of that, give me the Seahawks to really make Javonte Williams' day miserable. I think they move away from the run game early. Javonte Williams struggles, but he is your turning point player. Moving down the board, Jamar Chase against the New England Patriots. We still haven't gotten confirmation if he's playing or not, so that's going to be some fun to watch. But Jamar Chase, if he does play, will dominate the New England Patriots, get in the end zone a couple times. 20-point week for Jamar Chase. On the other side, Devontae Smith might end up being the guy this week with A.J. Brown blanketed by Jair Alexander. But I still think Devontae Smith has a middle-of-the-road game. Might find the end zone, but I think A.J. Brown is still going to be the focal point of the receiving core. So because of that, a middle-of-the-road game from Devontae Smith. Then you move on to Ferguson, the tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. I think Jake Ferguson might find the end zone. I think he's going to be a little bit more productive than people think against Cleveland. I think they're going to be so focused on CeeDee Lamb. Ferguson has a solid game. So, like the pick of Ferguson. And then Drake London, I think against Pittsburgh, he'll find a way to get in the end zone. I think, obviously, I'm not a huge fan long-term of Drake London, but I believe that he will be able to find the end zone and have a solid week one performance with Kirk Cousins throwing him the football. And that might turn into his new Justin Jefferson. Moving forward, the Lions defense, I think the Rams are going to find the end zone. I think turnovers could save the Lions, though, if they're able to force them. But I still think it's not going to be a great start for the Lions defense. Harrison Butker will get up some extra points and some field goals like that. And then Gillian for the New York Giants will be punting a ton week one against the Vikings. Then we look at the Flying Squirrels on the other side. The first quarterback in the room, it's Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow, obviously, we know he's had surgery on his arm. They said he can't throw, or nobody has ever been able to throw the same after that surgery. And because of that, I think he's still got a little bit of learning to do. Even if he's playing the Patriots, I think he still has a fine game. But I don't know if it's going to be the Joe Burrow of same. He's got a lot to prove, but I think it's a middle-of-the-road start for Joe Burrow. On the other side, we bring in Caleb Williams, your turning point player. And this is the time. We're going to figure out, is he worth the number one pick? And is he the best fantasy football value rookie quarterback? For the Flying Squirrels, he is the Tennessee Titans. I think he's got the weapons around him. He has a good week one. He's going to showcase the rushing ability, showcase the passing ability. I think this will be a great turning point player for you this week. I like Caleb Williams and Joe Burrow to be a solid 1-2 punch to battle Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson on the other side. Looking at the running backs, you bring in Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara has, against the Carolina Panthers, a great day on the ground and receiving. I think you will be not disappointed with what Alvin Kamara produces. On the other side, though, the running back, too, is Zamir White. I think he struggles against the Chargers' rush defense. I think he just struggles in general. I think Alexander Madison will take away some of his touchdowns or carries. Because of that, don't love Zamir White. Then we move on to the receiving core. I think Tyreek Hill will start there. 20-plus point week in week one. He always gets off to a fast start. See what I did there? Fast, it's Tyreek Hill. But Tyreek Hill will get off to a great start in week one against the Jaguars. And then Stephon Diggs. I talked about it earlier. I think the Texans are going to try to feed him the football. It's his newest team. He wants to be happy there. I think the Texans want him to be happy there. So a good week one for Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill. David Njoku, I think, has a fine week. He always gets off to slow starts, too, in the tight end room. I think the Browns don't look his way initially, but as the season goes on, they kind of remember, oh, yeah, we've got this guy. Let's get him the rock. So I think a slow start, again, for David Njoku. Then we bring to your flex position, it's DJ Moore. And I think DJ Moore, we talked about it earlier. Bears, Texans receivers, who's going to step up? I think Caleb Williams will get the rock around a little bit more to Odunze, Keenan Allen, and Moore. But I do believe that DJ Moore will be able to either find the end zone or make good enough catches for yardage. That'll make him a serviceable flex option this week. Looking down the board, Saints defense plays Carolina. Yes, that's a positive, probably 7+ points. Tucker's going to get plenty of kicks up and from distance against the Chiefs. And Hecker for the Panthers is going to punt. So even better, when your defense gets off the field, your punter is punting for more points. But looking at the two, Flying Squirrels, there's some positives there. Rough Riders, I think the quarterbacks are just too much. Give me the Rough Riders to defeat the Flying Squirrels in a 5-point spread. That's right, Rough Riders, my 10 projected team. Give them the week 1 victory. I love the quarterbacks to get them over the hump. And I think if Jamar Chase plays, it's a W for sure. So give me the Rough Riders over the Flying Squirrels in matchup number 4. In our 5th and final matchup, it's the Nathan Fantasy Football League Game of the Week. That's right. And if you can do the math, you know the Game of the Week. It's the Michigan Avengers, my number 1 projected team, being tested early by the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp. That's right. The Bowling Green Cave Shrimp take on the Michigan Avengers and what I can expect to be the game of the week. I think not just because it's my team, but I think this will be the most competitive game of the week. A lot of good players in this one. Let's first start with my Cave Shrimp. So the Cave Shrimp, Dak Prescott rolls out at quarterback, and we've kind of talked about that Cleveland defense. I'm a little scared of the Cleveland defense for week 1, especially with Dak and CD not being able to practice a lot together. So because of that, I think Dak has a poor start at week 1 as my starting quarterback, but let's not fret. I'm sure in week 2 he'll bounce back, but I do think it's a rough start at Dak Prescott at the helm. Brock Purdy on the other side. Again, another good quarterback for me, playing a tough defense. Give me Brock Purdy to also play in the range that Dak Prescott does. Both of them kind of frustrating week 1. Not great. But then we move on to my running backs, and that is where the positivity turns around. Jonathan Taylor, my first overall pick at number 9, will have me a 20-plus point game against the Texans. He's going to be ready to go. He wants to show he's fully healthy, and he is still the guy that 2 years ago was the best running back in the league. So Jonathan Taylor, excellent week 1. Josh Jacobs, on the other hand, playing the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he doesn't have the greatest Packers debut, similar to how Saquon will be. I think he'll show glimpses of being the guy that he was a couple years ago. But week 1, not great performance. So that's already 3 performances that are quite scary. On the other side of things, Garrett Wilson will show out, and Aaron Rodgers will make it through the first game. That's right. Aaron Rodgers is going to make it through the first game. That's what I'm predicting, and I think Garrett Wilson really benefits. He'll find the end zone. He's a 20-plus point player waiting to happen. I think Garrett Wilson has an excellent game. And then we get to my turning point player. It's Deebo Samuel. That's right. You're starting to notice the theme here. Monday Night Football is going to be busy. It feels like my team is playing on all the weird days, the Fridays, the Thursdays, the Mondays. But nonetheless, I think Deebo Samuel has a fine game. I think with Brandon Ayuk refusing to practice, all the stuff has been schemed up for Deebo Samuel. And I think because of that, Deebo Samuel could have an excellent game. But he is my turning point player because very quickly, the Jets defense could adjust, and Deebo has a terrible game. If he's not effective in the run game or getting the football, we've got a problem. So Deebo Samuel, my turning point player for the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp. Then we move on to my tight end position, Trey McBride, and he's playing a Bills defense that has lost a lot of pieces. I've heard a lot of people hype up Trey McBride, and I'm on that train. Trey McBride finds the end zone and turns out to be maybe the highest point scoring tight end of the week. I think really it's between him, Laporta, and maybe Kincaid. I think those 3, keep an eye out. I think Trey McBride finds the end zone at least once and gets a ton of targets and yards along with Marvin Harrison Jr., like we talked about earlier. Moving down the board, Isaiah Pacheco will kick me off on Thursday, and because of that, Isaiah Pacheco, I think, has a fine game. He's just a very middle-of-the-road guy who's consistent, 13, 14, 15. I think he sticks there, might find the end zone, but, you know, we talked about the preseason. He received, 90% of the running back, carries and receiving. He was on the field 90% of the time. If he keeps that up, he's bound to stay consistent all the way through the season. I really don't mind starting him with the middle of the row matchup. Then move on, defense. Steelers take on the new look offensive Falcons. Don't mind the Steelers to play middle of the row. They'll find a way to force some turnovers and get some sacks. I think Jake Elliott will get some good chances, kicking field goals for the Eagles, and Stonehouse for the Titans will be punting plenty. But now we get the Avengers side of things, and we're going to start again on Thursday Night Football. It's Patrick Mahomes rolling out against the Ravens. I think the Ravens will do a good job of keeping him in check. I think this Ravens-Chiefs game is going to be awesome to kick off the season, but I think both of them will kind of hit or limit each other's stars. Nonetheless, I think Mahomes still finds a way to stay above 17 points. And on the other side of things, Justin Herbert, he's not going to be throwing the ball much, but I do think they play a Raiders team that defensively is not good. So because of that, I think Herbert still finds a way to get that 16-plus point game because he might want to throw the football a little bit more against a bad Raiders team. Then we go to the running back room. We'll start with Breece Hall, who once again plays a tough 49ers defense. Once again, a Monday night guy. But Breece Hall, I think, will struggle out of the gates as the, obviously in our league, number 9 overall pick. But still, give me Breece Hall to have a fine game. Not a great game, not a first-round pick type of game, but he is playing the 49ers. On the other side of things, Jahmyr Gibbs will be the guy for Detroit. I think he'll find the end zone a couple times. He'll get most of the carries. And like I said, if David Montgomery doesn't take away from him, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a great week 1. Looking at the receivers, Mike Evans has a very good game. I think he finds the end zone at least once, gets plenty of targets. And I think it's a very similar story with DK Metcalf. I think those two are going to do pretty much the same thing. 17, 18, 19 points. I think they both find the end zone, both get plenty of targets, and both of them will flirt with 100-yard games. Then we move to the tight end. It's Mark Andrews, another Thursday night guy. I think, obviously, him returning from injury, him and Lamar still got to work back that connection. I still think, once again, the defenses on both sides will keep things interesting for who gets in the end zone. I do think Mark Andrews will get plenty of catches. He might even find the end zone, but it's a average game for Mark Andrews. Then we get your turning point player. It's Jalen Waddle. The only reason I do think he might find the end zone against the Jaguars, but I do worry because Tyreek Hill, obviously, week 1 has been exceptional. I think Jalen Waddle this season, we'll see a lot of it where if he's not getting the football and Tyreek's really going off, Jalen Waddle's going to struggle, maybe below 10 points a game if he can't really, contribute because Tyreek Hill is doing it all. So we'll see. Not a big fan on Waddle, though, for week 1. Then we move on. Cowboys defense, I think, finds a way to get that 6-plus point game. Still similar to the Browns. I think both offenses struggle, but the defenses play well. Brandon Aubrey will find a way to get 10-plus points. I don't know. He's just the magician at doing that. And then Behringer will get up 5 or 6 points. He'll be punting a ton. But as you can see, these matchups are going to be really fun because not only does it come down probably to the Monday game because both of us have players like Breece Hall or Deebo Samuel or Brock Purdy playing in it, but we also have the odd Thursday games and the Friday games and limited Saturday games, or Sunday games, But this will be a fun matchup, and in a 1-point spread, give me the Michigan Avengers. I'm going to take the Michigan Avengers. They're the number 1 team for a reason. They'll find a way week 1 to get it done. I think the Michigan Avengers will continue to have the best winning percentage after week 1 with a early victory. And I think the Cave Shrimp continue the trend that's been set before them. I've struggled in week 1s, my team getting out of the gates. It was 2 years ago that I finally won a week 1 game. So I think we continue that trend. We fall in week 1. We'll bounce back week 2 though. But that'll conclude our predictions video. You've heard it. We've got the the Avengers in the game of the week taking down the Cave Shrimp, the Bandicoots beating the Groundhogs, the Empire defeating the Iguanas, the Bunnies taking down the Zestmeisters, and the Rough Riders upsetting the Flying Squirrels. So that'll conclude today's episode of my predictions for this week. Let me know if you agree down below, or if you think, maybe I got a player wrong, or you think a different team should have won their week 1 matchup. Let me know who you're rooting for in the week or this week and more down below. And when we come back next time, we will update you on how week 1 went. And then after that, we'll get you the week 2 predictions. Thanks for tuning in on the Nathan Sports Talks Network and the Nathan Fantasy Football League updates.